We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Footballs. Peek around the corner with your host, Greg Flugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our ever-growing channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and friends. Welcome into the studio that sits on the corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. PATC community. Do not be afraid to be a legend in the chat room or with your phone calls later in the show. It's a lazy Saturday afternoon. I thought we should do a live show. It's probably not going to be a long live show. We're going to be talking about Bill Hancock's letter. I want to give you our take, PATC's take on the Bill Hancock's letter. I've gotten DMs for some of you that are in the chat room right now asking me, what are your thoughts on this letter? What do you think? I'm going to give you my thoughts. I have a very strong opinion on this Bill Hancock's letter and the responses around it. And I want you to give me your opinion in the chat or with the phone calls later in the show. I know, look, North Dakota State versus Montana in the semifinal game. I think that's going to be starting here in a few minutes. And of course, there's something called the Minnesota Vikings. I think they might have just lost the game in overtime. I'm not really sure. Something called the NFL. But we talk college football here at College Football's Peek Around the Corner. I want to thank the people, first of all, who have come on in early in this show. It's Coos Corner, Justin Walker, the myth, the man, the legend, R. Webb's in the house. John Till, early peak member. Let's go. Malik, UCLA has an opening. Malik Murphy, he's going everywhere. I think he's added some locations to his list of visits. Tim Bales is in the house. Coy's in the house. Kyle Visser. Steve is in the house. Nick Kelso is in the house. Daniel Black Rain, NFL legit playoff system. Jared Jones, Mr. Buckeye, early peak member, he's in the house. David Kreitzer is in the house. Holy smokes. Becky Go Huskies is in the house. Randy Taylor. Wow, I didn't think anyone was going to show up for this lazy Saturday afternoon. At least it's in Minnesota. It is gray clouds. It's not even a gray cloud. It's just a gray sky. Can't see anything but grayness in Minnesota. So let's talk about it. Let me open up my cherry Coke Zero Cherry. Put it in my mug. Let's get this thing going here. A lot of comments about Bill Hancock's letter. A response back to Senator, whatever that senator from Florida is, Rick Olson, Rick Nelson, Rick Scott, I think it is. The senator from Florida. A lot of people giving their response on it. I've been reading, watching, listening. I've been watching other college football YouTube channels. I saw the Monty Show's comments on it. I got to tell you, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, okay? I'm trying to be kind here. Man, everybody is missing it. Almost everybody is missing just this big component to it all. And it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts. I said to everybody in my family, I said, look, I'm going live with this. I don't care if 2 of you show up. I'm glad that 40 of you showed up. I appreciate it. But I got to get this off my chest. This is driving me absolutely nuts. So it's not really all that important either. We haven't covered it because we're on the ground floor of what's going on at North Carolina when it comes to the chancellorship and everything else that we've covered during the week. I didn't even think I was going to talk about this, but man, people, let's get into it. I am all fired up about really that's something that's really not important, except, well, it kind of is. Not for now, but for the future, for 2024, 25, 26, 27. There is a big component missing in what I would consider Bill Hancock's letter and other people's response to it. But before I start, I just want to make this. It's not always enough. Usually, it's not enough to be right about something. There has to be something more to it. So in life, you can be right about something, but oftentimes it's how you are right about something, how you are correct about something. That is even more important. Man, people are missing something here. We're going to get to it. We're going to get to it right now. Look, you all know, most of you know the story, right? Senator from Florida talking about needing more transparency. This is Bill Hancock's letter. Don't worry, we're not going to read it off this. Can barely read it. I can't see it. I'm too old, dumb, and blind to be able to read this. But we'll get to what is in the body of the letter, okay? This is the second page of the letter. Again, if you want to go back and highlight this, go ahead. We're going to go through Adelson ESPN article from last night, and it talks about what Bill Hancock said in the body of the letter, okay? So this is Bill Hancock's response to Senator Rick Scott over Florida State's omission. Now again, before we get into this, there are good people on both sides of the argument, right? I get it. I happen to think that Florida State got screwed, but that is my opinion. I've laid out the reasons why. I'm going to have to lay out again. But I'm okay with people in the PATC community disagreeing with me. Of course. And I think there are very good people, smart people, honest people who think that Florida State should not be in the playoffs. But again, there's something just gigantic missing in Bill Hancock's letter and people's response around it that are confirming or affirming Bill Hancock's letter. And I think it is what's driving people nuts. I think the Florida State Seminole fan base and people who believe that Florida State should be in the playoffs are being driven to crazy world because they believe there's something big missing, and I agree with them. We're going to get to it here. College Football Playoff Executive Director Bill Hancock responded to U.S. Senator Rick Scott and several other Florida congressmen over their demands for full transparency from the selection committee about why undefeated Florida State was left out of the playoff. In a letter sent Friday, Hancock told Scott the decision to rank Florida State number 5 was based on 2 principal reasons. The protocol the committee uses requires to take injuries into consideration. And it determined that the quarterback Jordan Travis' season-ending injury caused the committee to believe that they were indeed 4 teams that should rank higher than Florida State. In addition, Hancock said the Seminoles' strength of schedule was not as strong as those of the 4 teams ranked ahead of them. Number 1, Michigan. Number 2, Washington. And number 3, Texas. And number 4, Alabama. In noting the strength of schedule, Hancock wrote, if being undefeated without regard to team strength of schedule was part of our protocol, all the universities with undefeated records would have routinely been considered for the playoff. There have been 8, counting Florida State, undefeated teams that did not make the playoff. While this is the first year such a team was from a so-called P5 conference, strength of schedule remains a crucial factor. And we'll get back to the to Bill Hancock's so-called P5 conference statement. We'll circle back to that. Again, one of those things, not the biggest thing in this letter, but one of those things where Bill Hancock is technically correct. But how he goes about being correct leaves a lot to be desired. Really. I'll get into it later on. The phrase so-called Power 5 conference, P5 conference, drew consternation from Florida State officials and its fan base on social media because it implied the ACC was not one of the Power 5 conferences and had been treated in a similar manner to Liberty, and other undefeated group of 5 teams that did not make the playoff. Hancock provided clarification on that phrasing to ESPN on Saturday morning, saying, it is important to know that the college football playoff doesn't use the term Power 5 or P5, while the media and others use the term P5 to refer to the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, and SEC. We use the term A5 or Autonomy 5 instead. Well, I'll get back to that in a second. Again, Bill Hancock is technically correct, but the way he went about this did not do anybody any favors at all. in the college football world. He added that he used the phrase so-called to indicate it was not the official language of the playoff committee. The ACC has had 8 teams make the playoffs since it began in 2014, and as a conference, has the second best record in college football playoff games. Hancock also wrote in letter to Scott, everyone on the committee understands the disappointment felt by Florida State fans. We recognize that no matter what decision was made, fans somewhere would be disappointed. The committee members are confident they made the right decisions and rank in the best 4 teams in the country based on the protocol, and we all look forward to great playoff games. The day after Florida State became the first undefeated Power 5 team left out of the playoff, Scott sent this letter to the College Football Playoff Committee Chairman Boo Corrigan in search of transparency, demanding the votes of each member on the committee, in addition to notes, recordings, emails, texts, and written communication between the committee and a host of others, including the SEC, ESPN, and anyone not affiliated with the college football playoffs. This is Rick Scott's tweet. The college football playoff just responded to my letter with more excuses and still no transparency. Florida State was number 4 before beating number 14 Louisville without Jordan Travis. But then after that win, the college football playoff thinks Florida State is a weaker team. It makes no sense. Answer our questions. Hancock did not provide the information in his written response, which was also sent to U.S. Representative Neil Dunn and several other representatives from Florida who criticized the decision to leave the Seminoles out of the playoff. Earlier this week, Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody said she would launch an investigation into the committee. Now, so Bill Hancock did not offer the transparency that the Florida politicians wanted. You know, text message, communications, and all that. That is not what I'm talking about when I say there's something big missing from this letter. There is something gigantic missing from this letter. And I thought I'd put this issue behind me, right? I didn't think I was going to get all worked up again. But, again, people are missing something. But let's first get to Dennis Dodd. In regards to Bill Hancock's comment about so-called P5. Dennis Dodd. Whoa. The college football playoff doesn't use the term Power 5 or P5. Those 80 million playoff checks that go out to each year go only and equally to the P5 leagues. The playoffs literally defines P5. No so-called about it. Yes, but no. Again, Bill Hancock is technically correct. I understand what Dennis Dodd's talking about. We've gone over this, especially when it comes to 2024, 2025, and then the great gold rush of 2026 and beyond. The Power 5, the Autonomy 5, whatever you want to call them, they get paid differently than the G5 conferences. And it is spelled out. We're going to get to it in a second here. It is spelled out. The distribution money is different. Now, this is the last 4-team playoff, invitational, whatever you want to call it, where the distribution money goes, there's about 80% of the total pool, which is about $475 million, give or take $1 million, $10 million, whatever. And 80% of that total pot of money gets distributed equally to the Autonomy 5, to the 5 conferences. Power 5, Autonomy 5, or whatever you want to call it. Then 20% of that pot gets spread out to the G5 conferences. So when it comes to the college football playoff managers, the ones who set all this up. There is a Power 5, Autonomy 5 differential. There is. Now, this is part of the playoff committees. Each of the 10 conferences receive a base amount for the conferences that have contracts for the champions to participate in the Orange, Rose, and Sugar Bowls. The base combined with the full academic performance pool is approximately $79 million for each conference. The 5 conferences, G5, that do not have contracts for the champions to participate in Orange, Rose, and Sugar Bowls receive about $175 million, and that gets spread out among the 5 G5 conferences. 2024 and 2025, it's going to be different. Each Power 5 or Autonomy 4 conference team is going to get the same flat fee, no matter how small of an Autonomy 4 conference you're in or how big you are. Okay? So it's going to be a little bit different going into 2024. And you know what? Really none of that is at the heart and soul of this Bill Hancock letter. Bill Hancock is technically correct in saying when they go over who should be in the playoffs, when they rank them 1 through 25, they're not sitting there going Autonomy 5 team, G5 team, G5 team, Autonomy 5, Autonomy 5, Autonomy 5. That is what Bill Hancock, that's what I believe he meant when he said so-called power. They're the first, Florida State's the first Power 5 undefeated team not to have gone in the playoffs. And Bill Hancock saying there is no Power 5 when we're ranking them. Bill Hancock is technically correct. I do not think Dennis Dodd's argument really holds up, but I understand what he's saying. So that is another issue that we've delved into. Now, what is missing from Bill Hancock's letter? First of all, he talks about 2 protocols. He talks about Florida State. They're missing Jordan Travis. They're missing their top quarterback. And then he talks about strength of schedule. Right? His whole letter is about Florida State. And that's the problem. That's the problem. That's what's missing. Once again, we've had this from ESPN. Not everybody from ESPN, but almost everybody from ESPN. They simply, completely avoid discussing Alabama. Bill Hancock did the same thing. I truly believe what Florida State fans are saying is, who are you comparing us to when you talk about who's the best 4 teams? It's never, they're almost judging Florida State versus the protocol. They're not judging Florida State versus Alabama. And even if you do so, I understand good people, smart people are still going to side that Alabama is one of the top 4 teams. But when you're trying to explain why you did something, when you made the decision that you made, it can't just be about Florida State. That is what's getting everybody all cranked up again. Don't you understand? And then and we're going to go through it here. I've listened to people's response on ESPN. I see people mocking Florida State fans again. I see people mocking the politicians of Florida again. I see people supporting Bill Hancock all over ESPN. I saw the Monty show. I'm seeing all this stuff. But nobody wants to talk about Alabama. It isn't Florida State versus perfect team. There isn't just two protocols. What are we talking about here? It isn't just about who is healthy enough to play 3 weeks from now. And it isn't just about strength of schedule. It's about what you've done on the field. This Alabama team, nobody, throughout all this year, nobody has said this Alabama team is as good as the Alabama teams of the last 5 years. Nobody has said that. Nobody has said that because they aren't. They aren't. They barely beat South Florida 17-3. They barely beat a struggling Arkansas team. They beat them by 3. When a week before they beat Georgia, Alabama needed a miracle 4th and 31 to defeat Auburn, who the week before got wasted by New Mexico State, who did not win their Conference USA Championship game. They're playing in the bowl game right now, or it's going to start in the next 30 minutes. Great season by Jerry Kill, but Jerry Kill went down to Auburn, whooped them. And then it took a 4th and 31 miracle to beat Auburn. ACC was 6-4 against the SEC this year. Nobody was saying throughout the whole year this is a great SEC conference. The ACC was 6-4. Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner. I have him as my Heisman Trophy winner. His worst game, who was it against? Florida State. Not against all the SEC teams that he played, and one of them being Alabama. His worst game, the Heisman Trophy, worst game. The game that he struggled the most, the game that he was stopped, was against Florida State. Defense don't matter no more. All these great Alabama defenses the last 10 years, they mattered. But now suddenly Florida State has a great defense. That don't matter. You can look. Here's what's got people fired up. If you want to think Alabama's one, look. Before I go down that road, look. I don't think it's an automatic that a 12-1 Alabama team should get placed number 5 against an undefeated Michigan, undefeated Washington, a one-loss Texas that beat Alabama, and an undefeated Florida State. I don't think it's an automatic that Alabama should get the 5th spot. I could have been convinced that Alabama should have gotten the 4th spot. I could have been convinced that Alabama should be number 4 and Florida State number 5. I'm sorry, Seminole fans. I could have been convinced of that. But I wasn't. I wasn't because of how Alabama played this year, how Florida State played this year, and at the end of the season, that game against Auburn, that has to mean something. That was a terrible game. A miracle. A miracle took Alabama to win that game. But I think what Florida State fans, and I don't look, I'm not trying to speak for Florida State fans, but if Bill Hancock could have written a letter, or if when Kirk Herbstreit goes on a rant on his Twitter account, or when he's talking, or Stephen A. Smith, or any of these guys, if they could just say, look, I believe Alabama's one of the best 4 teams, they should go to the playoffs, and here's all the pros and cons of Florida State, here's all the pros and cons of Alabama. At least the Florida State fans can look back on it and say, okay, this guy looked at both ways. But go back, man. Go back and listen to these analysts on ESPN. Go read Bill Hancock's letter. It's never about Alabama. It's never about Alabama. It's always about Florida State. I could isolate on any team. If I'm just looking at one team, I could nitpick them to death. But you're comparing one team to another team. And if you're never talking about Alabama, if you just focused on two of the many protocols, if you just focused on, oh, the quarterback isn't going to be ready, Jordan Travis is out, and strength is scheduled, if that's it, if there is no more other discussion, then yeah, you're going to come up with Alabama. But there is a lot to pick on with Alabama this year. There just is. And Bill Hancock's letter never mentioned the word Alabama, and that is what was missing. It's not just about transparency when it comes to communications and email and all this stuff. It's about Alabama versus Florida State. Alabama, Texas, Florida State. Alabama, Texas, Florida State, Washington, and throw Michigan in there. But it's never about Alabama. And that is, again, the gigantic piece that is missing. And I think subconsciously, again, I'm not a lawyer, nor am I a psychiatrist. I'm just a fat guy from Minnesota. But I think subconsciously, again, Florida State Seminole fans and the people who support their position are all cranked up again because you keep leaving out Alabama. It's like they get a free pass. They got a free pass. Look, I know there's a bunch of SEC fans in the chat who are going to watch the show later. SEC still the best conference in football. They probably will be to the day I die unless more and more changes come about in college football and the gap starts closing. This was not a great SEC year. It wasn't. This Georgia team wasn't as good as the last two national champions. This Alabama team wasn't dominant. They were not dominant in any way, fashion, form. So this isn't one of those exceptions where you put Alabama in over a Florida State. I'm sorry. I don't see it. Again, you can think that Alabama should be in. Good and smart people do. But you got to talk about Alabama. Bill Hancock failed to do it again. All these shows that are going through Bill Hancock's letter and mocking Florida State, they're not talking about Alabama. Monty's show did not talk about Alabama. Why not? What is... Again, see? It's for whatever reason, people just avoiding Alabama. Okay. I'll get to your comments right now. I'm going to open up the phone lines. Again, never thought we would go back into it. I've been asked many, many times. There's people in the chat who send me DMs and everything, and I've been like, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And suddenly, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Okay, hold on, everybody. Phone lines is now officially open. If you want to give me a call on Bill Hancock's letter, tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I am missing. If you agree I'm missing on something. Whoop, time out. Something ain't working here. Okay. And let me know. I'm going to get to your chats real quick here. Again, if you want to support the channel with the super chat, hit the $sign with a comment. We'll get to it as soon as possible.
Call from.
Oh, I didn't get the name. I'm sorry. Who's calling?
JD.
JD, the floor is yours, sir.
You know, I wasn't going to call today, but yeah, this whole thing continues to rile all of us up.
Yeah,
it is a continuing thumbing in the eye. It is time after time. Listen, the biggest frustration is they constantly move the goalposts. And there's something else that's missing that people don't think about. They purposely leave Texas out of the argument because they put Texas at 3 to sneak Bama into 4 because there was no validity to argue Texas versus FSU. There wasn't. Their only quality win the entire year, and I mean like elite win or whatever, was against a bad Alabama team earlier in the year. And that was it. Okay? Look at Michigan, okay? And Michigan's quality win was against Ohio State. Okay? Ohio State was a good team. They weren't a great offensive. Well, they started scoring a lot against Michigan. But look at Michigan's schedule. Michigan's schedule was terrible. Okay? What was Ohio State's best win? Was it Notre Dame?
Yeah, they beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame, Penn State.
Okay. FSU beat 2 teams that beat Notre Dame handily this year. 2 teams that beat Notre Dame handily this year. And we can continue to go on and on and on. The point is they just keep moving the goalposts. Just admit it was a better financial decision for y'all to put Bama in. Because there's, like I said, Texas goes from 8 to number 3 on the last weekend when they were playing Oklahoma State, which was not a very good football team, or they weren't a real contender, you know. Yeah. And so they had to put Texas at 3 to justify Bama, because if Bama was at 3, they couldn't justify Texas over FSU. You can't. So you're going to go tell me that the Big 12 is the Big 12 conference champion is significantly better than the ACC conference champion, yet the ACC conference champion beat 2 teams that beat Notre Dame, beat at different points of the year, beat SEC teams, beat LSU, and you know, we could go on and on and on. Listen, we're everybody's kind of moving on that we got screwed, but they just started all over again.
Yeah, and that's my point. You know,
they keep moving the goalpost, and they keep changing their reasoning because they understand that the reasoning. It's like when the reasoning gets debunked, then they change to a different measure. You know, but anyway, go ahead.
It's just the reason why. You know, obviously, I disagreed with the. I disagreed with the decision. But I'm past that, right? And I think most people were like, okay, that's the decision and everything. But this Bill Hancock letter, I mean, I don't know what he thought he was going to. He wasn't answering. I don't understand the letter. The letter was terrible, to be honest with you. Even though I say that Bill Hancock is technically correct, but again, it was almost like he was trolling people with that letter. And I don't think he has the self-awareness to think he was. And I don't think, and so many of these ESPN analysts don't have any self-awareness. They've completely avoided talking about Alabama again. I think they're measuring Florida State up against a perfect team. That's what they seem like they're doing, because they never talk about Alabama. And I think subconsciously the Florida State fans are getting this, right? They're getting this. They understand. Them against Alabama was never going to happen for Florida State, because this was, let's be honest, everybody, this was one of the worst Alabama 11-1 teams you're ever going to see in your lifetime. And yet they still got in over Florida State. Unbelievable, really, in my opinion.
Well, Alabama's got a lot better towards the end of the season.
Well, but okay,
it's
I don't
still
mean to
not one of
interrupt you,
his best
JD.
teams.
What?
I said, but it's still not one of their best teams.
But they were terrible against Auburn.
Oh, I know.
And that just happened. That's just, and I'm not yelling at you, JD. I'm yelling at.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm just saying, it's almost like. No, okay. If you say, if I'm an ESPN analyst and I'm Stephen A. Smith, and I say, well, I'm going Alabama, Florida State, and Alabama, they played a really bad game against Auburn. They 99% of the chance they would have lost that game. Miracle, yeah, it was a good throw, but Auburn should have defended it. Blah blah blah. Alabama, terrible game. That hurts them. Oh, by the way, but I still got them over Florida State. That is something that at least people can take in. But that's not what Stephen A. Smith and ESPN's doing. They're saying, of course Alabama's in over Florida State. Look at Florida State. They don't have their starting quarterback. Oh, by the way, if Florida State's head coach with Deion Sanders, they would be in. That's what Stephen A. Smith said. I mean, it's a joke how ESPN is taking on this issue. And I believe they're just trolling Florida State fans. I believe I want to say the word disrespect. I don't want to use that word, but there's something going on there, man, and it's coming out in waves. And Bill Hancock did nobody any favors with his letter.
Look at the way that he started the letter, and he was somewhat disrespectful to a U.S. senator. The way he started the letter, talking about he's glad that he took the time to pay attention to college football, or I wouldn't phrase that exactly. That's kind of if you want to read it, you can, but it's just that's not direct quotes, but it's just some people use passive aggressive, whatever. I mean, it's disrespectful, and I don't know. Again, it's not that we're so hung up that we expect to be the belle of the ball and the center of attention from now till next season. It's that, again, they keep ripping off the Band-Aid over and over and over again. They constantly move the goalpost because the narrative they set gets debunked, and then they have to move on to another one, and another one, and another one. And then all it does is it just pisses you off again. Because just tell me the damn truth. It was about you couldn't leave Bama out. You're an SEC team, whatever happened between Sankey and whoever else. They sat there and they politicked. And somebody else said it was a former member of the committee had acknowledged that while they were there, that they're deciding on teams, they're getting calls from politicians. They're getting calls from congressmen and senators, and they acknowledged it, before this past vote, this past committee. But they said in previous ones, they were constantly getting calls from influential members when it looked like it would be possibly a tough decision to be made. So you mean to tell me that they weren't influenced? Of course they were. Of course they were. Do you mean to tell me that? I mean, ESPN. I mean, you can go back to, I think it was November 18th. Herb Street brought up the scenario.
Yeah.
He brought it up.
Yeah. And they're avoiding they are avoiding talking about that as well.
And it's just, it's just, and when you're talking about Stephen A. and whatever else, well, we wouldn't have to worry about Deion, because this team wouldn't be 13-0 with Deion.
But
maybe Deion can be a good coach one day. Deion's going to have to become a lot more humble for that to happen. Yeah. And that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, and Bill Hancock, in his letter, and this is also, besides the complete avoidance of Alabama, Let me see if I can pop up the right. I probably can't because I'm an idiot. Where is it here? Oh, Greg. What are you doing? Hold on, everybody. Well, I can't find it, but I'll just paraphrase it. Bill Hancock in this letter says there's two our protocol. One, we have to take into consideration who's injured, who's not going to play. Number two, strength of schedule. Well, there's a whole bunch of other things they have to talk about, and they do. It's not a 2-point protocol, but that's how he wrote the letter. You know,
Sure.
that in itself is a troll job. And if it's not a troll job, then this guy's like one of the worst communicators I've ever seen. I'm more fired up now than I've been since the beginning of this because of this letter. Again, good. Now you and me, myself and Mr. Seminole JD might disagree on this, and that's okay. I think there is good, honest, smart people who think Alabama's one of the top 4 teams, and I think they can make an argument and fine, go ahead, and that won the day. And maybe it's not a conspiracy, maybe it's not any bad intentions, whatever. But again, the way they've talked about it since the decision was made has been horrific. Again, never examining Alabama at all. Complete avoidance. It's only about Florida State and their weaknesses in the protocol. It's terrible.
If the narrative started in previous years or whatever else, the same people that created the narrative for FSU to not make it in just in weeks prior were saying that there's no way an undefeated FSU doesn't make the playoff. It came out of their mouths in national broadcasts. Greg McElroy, the week before, said no matter what, if you have 2 one-loss SEC teams, that you cannot leave FSU out. A week later, he said you have to.
Yeah, he completely changed.
Herb Street, a couple of weeks before that November 18th game day, said an undefeated FSU team has to, an undefeated Power 5 champion must be in there. Unless you have 5 undefeated Power 5 champions, then you have to pick one. Okay? Again, like you said, I don't have, and I agree with you, listen, I live in the Florida Panhandle now, you know, and we have almost as many Bama fans here as you do Florida or FSU fans. Yeah. And I can understand why they feel like they should be in the playoff. Okay? Mm-hmm. Again, would I be upset if everybody was on the up and up and we got left out? Yes. But the thing that people don't get, the part that burns the most is we know it wasn't on the up and up. We know it wasn't. They've shown their hand. I mean, they put it out there in front of our face and are laughing at us because we see it. It's like you rip me off, you tell me about it, and then you laugh at me because I'm upset. Yeah. And that's what this is.
Yeah.
And, you know, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but if it turns out, okay, and we're going back into realignment, if it turns out FSU is headed to the Big Ten, which I think they are, again, we know it won't. We know it's a multi-step process. Yeah. So, you know, it's not going to be a just, you know, one announcement and done thing. But, you know, I won't be shocked if there were some people at ESPN that said, well, screw them. You know, they're not going to be a part of our umbrella anyway. Yeah. So, you know, and Bama will be. You know, will I say? am I saying that had something to do with it? I can't say that. But now I'm beginning to wonder, possibly, and I don't know. I don't know. But it's just, I think I sent you this on X yesterday, that when it was going around, and the so-called thing,
Yeah, I went over that in my monologue, and I don't think Bill Hancock is technically incorrect, and it's just the way he communicated. It was the worst way to do it. Not a good job. Terrible, actually.
What it is, he just ripped off a letter is what he did. They just typed up a letter, and they had an attitude when they were typing it up. I'm sure it was his assistant. And then he's just like, here, I don't have time for this kind of a thing. And it's like, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm sure other people are going to want to call in, and I appreciate you giving me so much time.
I appreciate it, JD. And I feel kind of bad that I'm kind of ripping off the Band-Aid on this scar. But again, I kind of think that Bill Hancock did it before I did it. So I'm just trying to, I think it was important to have this live show because the letter was terrible. Even if it was technically correct on many points, still it left out big things. And anyways, JD, I appreciate the call, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Beautiful call by JD, Mr. Seminole. Ryan Willie. In my opinion, the only reason Bama got into the college football playoffs is because of the SEC ESPN marriage. ESPN would have lost a lot of money. Monty laughed at me because I implied there's collusion between ESPN and college football playoffs. Monty has stated he's working at ESPN.
Call from
John.
Is it John?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, can you hold on 1 second, sir?
Yeah.
Just got to get super chats here. Thank you, sir. I know a lot of people believe the same thing you do, Ryan. ESPN could have lost some money because, Alabama not being in it, no representative from the SEC. But thank you, Ryan, for the super chat, for your continued generosity to the channel. I appreciate it so very much. Opie, thank you so much for your generosity, your continued generosity to this channel. Opie says, Will, got to go, so we'll have to listen later. This is for the new energy efficient lights later. Thank you, Opie. I appreciate it. I appreciate your super chat, your incredible generosity. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Opie. Thank you guys so very much. John, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you for taking my call. Hey, I was wanting to talk to you about ACC realignment.
Yeah.
Since the PAC-2, I think they kind of sealed the deal with their money situation. And this is all hypothetical, but it might be able to make a few people happy. You got the 8 schools in the ACC, the 2 Carolinas, the 2 Virginias, Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Miami.
Yes, sir.
And then you got the other 9 schools. And like I said, this is hypothetical, but what if those 9 schools said, maybe we should join the PAC-2 and just leave this over here so we know we're safe? That would make the PAC-2 a G5 conference. That would leave the other 8 schools, and they could renegotiate their contract with ESPN. And since ESPN had the contract on the 9 schools that transferred to the PAC-2, they would have the West Coast, and that would make them happy again. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. If you think there's any possibility something like that might happen, and everybody would kind of get what they want, and that's my call.
Okay. It's a great. Thank you for the call. It's a great call, great question. Would The question is, would those ACC schools, the ACC schools, they'd be, they'd be 9 of them, wouldn't they? Would those schools, combined with an Oregon State and Washington State, would they be able to get the 31, 32, 33, $34 million a year in tier 1, tier 2 payments on a media deal? I don't think so. I think that's a problem. Hold on.
Call from
Jamie Thornton.
Jamie, can you just hold on 1 second here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. Just want to answer John's great question here. So that's a problem. I don't think if you combine those ACC schools that are not the Virginia schools, the North Carolina school, Miami, Florida, Florida State, Clemson, Notre Dame, the Magnificent Seven plus Notre Dame, I don't think those schools combined with Oregon State and Washington State is going to get a media deal good enough or anywhere near good enough to have those ACC schools content, right? One other thing that we have to keep an eye on is the ACC network as well. The ACC network is a network that ESPN invested a whole lot of money in. Those ACC schools also invested a couple $1 million each when it came to inserting fiber optics and whatever they had to do into their facilities. I'm using the word fiber optics. I have no idea what I'm talking about. But they had to do some installation that cost each of those schools a couple $1 million to have it all work out. Where would the ACC network go in that situation? Would it go with the remaining schools that form their own conference, the big brand ACC schools in Notre Dame? Because I don't think Wake Forest and Pittsburgh and all those other schools want to give up the ACC network. It's a great question, great to theorize, speculate about. Obviously, I don't think the chances are very high of that happening, but we shall see. Crazy things have happened. I think it's a better chance, not much of a chance, but I think there's a better chance that Washington State and Oregon State, with all that cash coming in, I think they're going to give a call to the ACC to try to possibly SMU their way into the conference. However, there is the House versus the NCAA. That case is going to cost all these schools that we're talking about in FBS. It's going to cost everybody millions and millions of dollars to pay off that court case. And I think Washington State and Oregon State might take some of that money and stow it away to make sure they can pay off the House NCAA case. And I think that's part of the reason why the Pac-10 schools want to get some of that money that's coming to the Oregon State, Washington State. I hope I kind of answered your question, John. Jamie, thank you for your patience. Miss Arkansas, the floor is yours.
Well, I have to start with a woo pig suey, so that's the only way that I can start.
That's right.
But I do want to say the word of the day, which you have mentioned, and you have even said, watching this ACC stuff, talking about that, politics.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that heavily involved in this, politics. It's going to keep going. And I just want to say real quick, because I really wanted to talk about this today, the subject, but now that you mentioned the ACC, before everybody thinks the ACC is going to become what the PAC did, let's not forget this. We know it's going to cost quite a bit of money. We don't know yet how much it is. I am honestly under the opinion that with ACC holding the power with all these grant of rights and for another 13 years, that it's going to cost no less than $300 million. Let's not forget
I agree with you, Jamie. Jamie, I agree with you. But you and I are in the minority right now. But I agree with you. Just to let you know.
Let me just remind the chat before they go crazy on me as well about this. And I love JD, and I'm always with JD. But I heard his call the other night, and I'm like, I got to tell you something, friend. I'm like Oklahoma and Texas, who are still under ESPN right now and are coming to the SEC a year early. They had to pay $100 million combined to leave 1 year early. What do you think is going to happen when we're talking about 13 years left? So my point to that is this. Florida State, yeah, they're going to come up with the money to do it. North Carolina, the SEC wants them badly. They're going to work something out somehow. But let me tell you this much. Anyone that thinks the ACC is going to implode, if you can't get into the SEC or the Big Ten right now, which I don't see any more than 6 schools at max, maybe not even that many. I mean, all this Virginia Tech stuff, the SEC might just look to add 2 right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these other schools are not going to pay Miami is not going to pay $300 million to go to the Big 12. They're not going to pay a $300 million. I just don't see it. I just don't see that happening. I don't see Georgia Tech paying $300 million to get out to go to the Big 12. And so that's got to be reassuring to the ACC. You know, like you said, they were smart to backfill, and they could certainly do it again if they needed to. They know Oregon State, like you said, Oregon State and Washington State, there's that possibility where they could try to get them to come in and do an SMU type deal if they needed to. But I just don't see, and maybe I'm wrong on that, Craig, I just don't see these schools, whatever the cost it's going to be for Florida State. I don't know. I don't even know if Clemson has a home. I just don't know if enough presidents are. How is the Minnesota? How is the Iowa? How is the Ohio State and Michigan presidents going to feel about Clemson coming into the Big Ten? I don't know. I don't know that they would want that. I know obviously they're going to want Florida State. That's a no-brainer. So the question is, like, even if you had the money, like say Clemson, you might not even have a home in this right now. Not somewhere that it's worth going to pay that kind of money to get out. So it's just something to think about. I just want people to, before they think the ACC is going to implode, that's not necessarily the case at all.
Yeah.
So it's
agree.
crazy. But like you said, yeah. Like you said, politics, it's going to be a big thing involved. And I mean, we have had politics involved in all this stuff. There's no doubt about it. Look, we can try to keep arguing about different ways to judge Florida State versus Alabama. I looked at Florida State's schedule. I know, and just to be fair, I did this because everybody has a bad game. I know we keep talking about Alabama and my mighty Razorbacks that is them, you know. And this wasn't a good Arkansas team, by the way, folks. This wasn't the Arkansas team from the last 4 years. This was the Arkansas team from 5 years ago in the end of the decade, when Chad Morris was there. It was more like that Arkansas team. And the turf monster, dadgummit, hadn't gotten my boy, but
yes, I remember that. I yelled about it. Oh, the turf monster. He was gone.
Yeah.
Oh,
he
I think
gone.
he would have scored, but
yeah. But yeah, you know, he would have gone for it. But anyway, all that, I looked at Florida State's schedule. They had one bad game. They beat Boston College 31-29 with their quarterback. It was a very tight game. Yeah. But other than that was like their one bad game a year. So no matter how you compare the resumes, you know, it's obvious. I thought, you know, I sent you the message earlier about that, and I got a good laugh out of this letter because, it's a troll letter. I'm sorry, it really is. I mean, it's pretty much that, and we all know what happened. But this kind of stuff's been going on in college football for a long time, and in fairness, it happened to West Virginia against Florida State. Bobby Bowden, all the president, they were all campaigning in '93 to get that slot over Nebraska, and they had the one loss, and West Virginia had an undefeated season. So they can't act like this hasn't happened, that they haven't gotten a slice of the pie, too, from the past. I'm not saying it makes this right.
There's
happened. No doubt.
It's happened. And I understand that, and I understand all the comments in the chat room and everything. But I don't, how do I say this? It doesn't, I don't know how to say this.
Say it, Greg. You can say it.
Well, you know what? If I had a college football YouTube channel back in those days, I'd be probably saying, you know, I'd be all riled up about why not West Virginia, why Florida State and everything. But, you know, today's this year. I kind of like to focus on, you know, what's happening now. The world, it's complete. College football obviously has completely changed from what it was back in the early 90s and the 80s. It's going to change again. So it's
and my uncle talks about it, Greg. My uncle always talks about the Arkansas is kind of known for their '64 national championship team. I don't know if people know this or not, but back in the day, that was the last year where they decided the national title before the bowl game was played. And Alabama was undefeated, and Arkansas was undefeated. They were the two undefeateds, and Alabama was declared national champs. And Alabama lost in the Sugar Bowl, and Arkansas won, beat Nebraska in the Cotton Bowl. So Arkansas was kind of given the national title, but they weren't official national champions that year. And so they decided after that, hey, we better change things. So things get better, and I hope that's kind of what we maybe there's some kind of I hope there's some kind of ethics or something that's put in place, or at least do this right for next year when the selection committee starts. Have the rules laid out about what we're going to go based off of. Have something factual instead of just this. We're going to be behind closed doors, and we know the connection with SEC. We know the connection with Alabama's better TV ratings. Nothing against Florida State; they have great ratings.
Yeah,
but they're a powerhouse.
In 2025, Jamie, in 2025, when Arkansas finishes the season 10-2, and my beloved Golden Gophers finish the season 10-2, and my Gophers are ranked. They get the 11th spot. They get the last at-large spot, and Arkansas does not. You and I are going to argue about it, right?
That's true. They're going to also think this is called delusional. Peek around the corner if you keep saying those kind of things. Arkansas and Minnesota with Tennessee. No, I'm just joking.
Okay, maybe I should have used the different examples, especially with the Golden Gophers. But
right.
You know what I'm saying. There's always going to be arguments.
I do, Greg.
It's part of it.
One of these days, Arkansas and Minnesota, even if it's under a lifetime, are going to play for the national title.
Yeah.
And we're going to watch the game together and have a great time.
Got it. All right.
It's going to happen one day. I can feel it.
Got it. All right.
Thank you,
much,
Greg.
Jamie.
Yeah, you take care and have a great day, man.
Yeah,
I
you
love
too.
the show.
Appreciate it. PNW Ute, Duluth around the corner. Holy smokes. Holy smokes. I've got news. Is any Buckeyes in the chat? Is any Buckeyes in the chat? I cannot find a Buckeye. Well, let me tell you something, Buckeyes. Let me tell you something, Ohio State Buckeyes. Oh, yes, son of Sarah. Ooh, Greg. Okay, they are in the house. Expedition Greg, son of Sarah. Okay, all right. You know that December 20th is the first day of early signing, right? And there is a gentleman, a player, Coy Pirich, the number 3 rated safety in the country, or the number 8th rated safety in the country, somewhere between 3 and 8. From Elk Grove, Minnesota. Not a whole lot of great football is played in that area of Minnesota. Okay. But if you put on his tape, it's like a video game. He's faster than... He's unbelievable. He is a freak. We talked about him here in the chat a couple months ago. I watched him play basketball as a sophomore. He went up here and played against Maple Grove. I saw it. He was a freak athlete as a sophomore. Dunking the basketball. Fastest guy up and down the court. Okay, so Coy Pirich committed to Minnesota long ago. The Buckeyes come on in. So did Florida State. Minnesota's trying to keep him. Ohio State's visiting him. Last night, Ryan Day and the defensive coach went to see Coy Pirich again last night. It's the last time they can visit him. Minnesota's already run out of their visits with Pirich. After Ryan Day and the coaching staff left Coy Pirich's house, there was a couple cryptic tweets out there from defensive coaches from Minnesota. I wish I had it lined up. I'd show you. That could be read in a little bit positive message for the Gophers there. Then, I don't want to get into it too much, but on Minnesota 247, there's a little bit more positivity It sounds like possibly maybe Koa Perch is staying with Minnesota. He's not going to be decommitted. He's not going to the Buckeyes. When the Buckeyes first offered Perch a couple months ago, Mo and Vision put it in the comments section. Of course, that said he's gone. He's gone. He's a Buckeye. But maybe not. Maybe not. Now, the great Tyler Nubin, the great safety from Minnesota, All-American, is going to be drafted in the first round next spring. He's been on the phone with Koa Perch. Antoine Winfield Jr., great Gopher safety, of course, dominating the NFL, going to be an All-Pro this year. He's been calling Koa Perch to try to keep him in Minnesota. Maybe for the second time in, I think, modern day history, the Gophers are actually going to be able to keep somebody that the Buckeyes targeted. So it's a victory. I think we don't know for sure, obviously, but he's going to be making the announcement, Koa Perch, in Elko, Minnesota, Wednesday at his high school. Feeling pretty good. He's probably the one Gopher player next year that could have played for the Buckeyes. Let's put it that way. Okay. Enough of that. Yes. Coy might stay on his perch. Maybe. It looks good. Sounds good. If it doesn't happen, I'll be heartbroken. Unbelievable, like, just... unbelievable talent. Ooh, Kyle Visser, Montana 7, North Dakota State 3. I'm rooting for Montana. I'm rooting for Montana to win the whole thing. They're getting so close. Montana Grizzlies are getting so close. South Dakota State finally won their national championship last year. They beat Albany 59-0 in the semifinal game last night. South Dakota State, the defending champion, the Jackrabbits, are back in the FCS championship. They're going to play the winner of Montana and North Dakota State. North Dakota State, as you all know, are basically the New York Yankees of FCS football. Montana, this could be it. Son of Sarek, Minnesota will get him 1 year, and then he'll transfer to Ohio State. That very well could happen. What's been happening is big-time Minnesota high school football players have been going to the helmet schools and then coming back to Minnesota. That's what's been going on. Quinn Carroll, the right tackle, played at Notre Dame for 3 years, came back to Minnesota. He was a great player in high school, great offensive lineman, 5-star, yada, yada, yada. Now he's got 1 more year left, been playing great for Minnesota. So that's been happening. But yeah, we could, you know how it is, son of Sarek. The portal. So much movement going on right now. It's crazy. All these 4-star true freshmen just got done with the true freshman season. SEC, they're leaving. They're going to another SEC school. It's just musical chairs right now. Very difficult. Very, very difficult. One other thing. Expedition Greg, 6-3, Appalachian State over by Miami, Ohio in the Cure Bowl. Thank you, Expedition Greg. Yeah, we won't go over that right now. Okay, so the phone lines are open. 763-260-1333. I felt we really should do this live show on a lazy Saturday afternoon because, well, let's be honest. I had to make some sort of comment about the Bill Hancock letter. Technically, he's correct about the so-called Power 5 portion of his letter. He should not have put it that way, but there is no Power 5, P5 labeling when they're ranking the teams. So he's correct. Dennis Dodd is kind of correct when he says, yes, there is an Autonomy 5, now an Autonomy 4 reference when it comes to distribution payouts But that's not what Bill Hancock was really alluding to. And technically, Bill Hancock is right. The protocols, strength of schedule, the injury aspect, a lot of things he's right about in that letter, but he missed a big opportunity to say to the Florida State fans, the politicians, the people are upset with the decision. Bill Hancock missed a big opportunity to say, look, these are also the things we looked at Alabama. Some of them good, some of them not so good, but ultimately we decided on Alabama. He did not do this in this letter. Most of ESPN haven't done that. The complete avoidance of talking about Alabama.
Call from
Dan.
Dan, thanks for calling. The floor
Greg,
is yours, sir.
Yeah, nice. Having a nice day then. You're staying pretty busy?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay. My comment, Greg, is I don't think, talking about conference realignment, if the ACC would happen to fall apart, I don't think the Big 12 and ACC should do a merger. I think the Big 12 will go in for a couple, 3 schools that they want, maybe get up to 20 teams, Pittsburgh, Louisville, maybe Miami if they're left, and Georgia Tech, something like that. That's one comment. Other comment is as far as the basketball part of it, the Big 12 with the basketball as good as it is right now, maybe nil in the future. Maybe those players will stay longer, and the Big 12 can maybe catch up a little bit with the Big 2. But I think they have a position that's going to remain solid. It's just going to always be struggling forward. But I think there's definitely a path. So great show as always, Greg. Hope you have a nice evening. Take care. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
You got it. Good. Great phone call, Dave. Appreciate it. I agree with you. I do not see a merger between the Big 12 or the ACC. I don't see it. Now, can my mind change after the ACC implosion starts happening? Yeah, maybe. But why would there be a merger now? What is the advantage for Brett Yormark? I don't see it.
Call from
Immaculate.
Immaculate, can you hold on 1 second, sir?
Of course.
Appreciate it. Yeah, Dave, I agree with you. I do not see a merger happening now. I don't see the advantage for the Big 12. I think they should wait for the ACC implosion. I can't believe Yormark. I don't think Yormark. I think Yormark's going to continue to possibly poke and prod his Big 12 presidents on possibly expanding with some Big 12 with basketball-only additions, maybe, and talking to his immediate partners, maybe he keeps going down that path. But a merger, why would he do that? After all that he's done, I think he's got the high ground. Slightly, he's got the high ground over the ACC, particularly when we're talking about this potential ACC implosion. I agree with you. And the basketball thing, it's interesting, right? I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know how the economics of this is going to play out, where Brett Yormark keeps talking about decoupling the basketball content for the football content and selling it separately. I have no idea how that's going to work out. Brett Yormark, very interesting. I think he's way too aggressive to do a merger when he's got the high ground. Immaculate, Mr. Hawkeye, offensive coordinator rumors, possibly, no, yes. What's going on, sir? The floor is yours.
Yeah, well, I can bring that up real quick. The scuttlebutt, I don't know if it's true or not, or if it actually happens, but there is a offensive analyst at Ohio State that is supposedly being looked at, that put in his little word that he'd be interested and might be going through the process. We'll see. I don't know if anyone's heard of Mr. Philbin, but that's who they're talking about. In terms of the letter and some of the fallout of it now, I swear to you, I thought that I remembered that on that page there was verbiage that said power conferences. And I looked at that before Dennis Dodd, before I saw his response, and it wasn't there. So I was like, oh, okay, maybe I remembered wrong. And then I saw his response, and I'm like, oh, okay, does he kind of remember the same thing I did? And I don't want to say that they changed the lettering in there, especially not, to cover this, but just maybe at some point they changed it. But yeah, I kind of remember that they had the verbiage power conference in there. And if I'm being honest, I don't ever remember anyone when they're talking, even live talking on ESPN, like when they're the committee chair speaking. I don't really remember them using autonomous conferences all that much.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I think I think Hancock was correct in that part.
Well, but he said the reason why he said so-called power conferences is because the verbiage they use internally is autonomous conferences. They don't say power conferences anymore.
Yeah.
Now, which is kind of an ode to the power of the autonomous voting system. And I've thought for a while that they've wanted to empower that. That's a whole nother story. Mm-hmm. But when they're making that assertion that that's how they look at them, kind of tells me somewhere along the line that's what they're pushing for is more autonomy. But yeah, I kind of thought it was a nothing burger. Like whether or not what he intended, there was clear passive aggressive word usage going on through the whole thing. So it was. I just don't think he realized it was going to get shared publicly and go viral. So they reached out to someone at ESPN on that. Mm-hmm. In terms of the ACC stuff and the talk of a merger alliance, I don't get it. And maybe it's because we've been listening to this all for too long. Anytime I hear them talk, we're doing an alliance, we're doing a merger, lights start going off, like warning sirens. They use this over and over again whenever they're all having these big talks. They know, well, we're doing a scheduling alliance, or we're talking about a merger, and it never happens. Never happens, but some other things do. And so while they're having these so-called alliance merger talks, I think that they're probably actually coming up with something else. What that is, I don't know. We could all probably come up with a different thing, and one of us might be right or none of us might be right. I personally think if a whole bunch of schools are going to leave, well, I've talked about what I think some of the schools in the ACC want to be, and that requires finding a way for some schools to be in the Big 12. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
I think that they're talking something about movement of schools, whether it's just a whole all-out alliance or merger. Those numbers don't look good. Like if you're taking 16 teams from the Big 12 and say the ACC loses 6 and goes down to 12, that's a 28-team conference. Like just boom, out of the blue. I'm not saying we don't ever go to 24 or 25 or more, but to go from 16 and 18 to 28 immediately, that seems a bit much. I have a hard time believing that's really what they're truly about. So I don't know. I think that there's something there, but they're not telling us what it is. And, just to kind of give throw a little something out there that gets everyone stirred up. When we talked before about possibilities of Oregon State and Washington State, mm-hmm. I always said there's some possibilities out there, but none of that can happen as long as they're in a lawsuit with their current conference. No conference is going to get in the middle of that. Yeah. No conference is going to talk and discuss, and it's just too dangerous. So now that that's over, not saying those schools are going to get an invite anywhere, because I wouldn't know. But at least now, if they were being looked at, it's actually possible now. So maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't. Maybe they're part of that discussion. I don't know. But what happened now when the Supreme Court threw that out is that lawsuit ended. And so now, technically, those two schools are not involved in one right now. And if any of the other schools then raise a lawsuit against the PAC in response to this, well, it's not those two schools that are suing their conference. So people are going to believe what they want to believe on that, and I'm certainly not going to, make any declarations because that would just be wrong. But they're free and clear now. They are free and clear to be talked to, and some of those rumors are that it's the Big 12, the ACC, and the Pac-2 that are talking. So I don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
But just yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering, and I'm going to throw this out there. This is speculation on my part, okay?
Good stuff.
I'm wondering if it seems like it's gotten real tight between the Mountain West in Oregon State and Washington State. They did this scheduling for the 2024 season for football.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they're going to do the 2025 scheduling. The basketball programs, there was a report a couple days ago that Washington State and Oregon State basketball programs looking to get into the Mountain West Conference for basketball. There's some report on that. And within these reports, it's been saying with the look of having a more official relationship between the Mountain West schools and Oregon State and Washington State in the future, like there's going to be a merger. Also, Gloria Nevarez, the commissioner of Mountain West, has been reported that she, within this agreement with Oregon State and Washington State, there is some penalty that Washington State and Oregon State would have to pay if not all the Mountain West schools would be included into this. Mm-hmm. Okay? So my theory, just a theory, no one has told me this, off record, on record, nothing, just my theory. I'm wondering if Oregon State and Washington State, at the beginning or midway through this court cases with the Pac-10, the other 10 schools, I wonder if they've reached out to potential, ACC, the Big 12, and said, if we win this case, if we win the whole enchilada, could there be a pathway where the Big 12 would make us the 17th, 18th school? We kind of pay our way in. We grease the skids with our own money coming from the Pac-12. Or with the ACC, we could SMU our way in. I wonder if they had those conversations and maybe they were told, no, we're not, ACC saying we're not done. We don't need to potentially backfill. We're okay for now. And the Big 12 continue to say, no, we're just not looking in that direction. I wonder if they received that message and then they went in tight with the Mountain West. I wonder if that's a possibility of what happened in the last 6 months.
Yeah, to me it seems like that the agreement they did with the Mountain West is a 1-year agreement. And they're paying the Mountain West, which means I think if they would have gone like an all-in style agreement with the Mountain West, like we're going to do this for 2 years and then we're going to merge and all that, I don't think they would have to pay. I think that would have been well within the Mountain West's desires as well. But they did pay for this. So to me, it felt a little bit like they're going in that direction. Like, okay, yeah, we see that this may have to be the case, but they didn't commit. You know what I mean? Like, they're not committed with the Mountain West yet. They're just
I wonder.
Doing what they have to do for 24.
Yeah.
Set up if they have to do it again in 25. But they paid them so that way there's not a commitment. That's my take on it, and that could be wrong. I just think that they're trying to keep their options open without, you don't want to kill your option with the Mountain West because that might be where you have to go. But at the same time, I don't think that they're ready yet to go all in with that and if something else opens up. Because they've been pretty obvious, or not obvious, but pretty open with their comments about wanting to be in a Power 5 conference. And I haven't seen them say differently.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it. Is that I think that they're going in that direction, but they didn't commit. Like they could still veer off and go in a different direction. But
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But the difference is now, because of that lawsuit's over. I mean, now if something was going to happen, if they did have talks, or if someone else was interested, I don't think it could have even happened before. But who knows? It might now. We'll see.
Yeah.
But yep, that's all I got. I thought that letter thing was hilarious, and it was interesting to watch Dodd
Yeah.
call it out of the ESPN reporter. It was like, when have we seen this before? I don't know if I ever have.
Yeah.
So maybe the politics of this whole situation is starting to reach out into media partners, as CBS is switching, and Dodge used to be thank you kind of his voice, and then that's kind of become Dellinger, and it just stood out to me. So we'll see. But anyways, man, I always like talking to you. I'll let you go here, and have
appreciate
a good day.
it, Immaculate. Thank you much. Great call by Mr. Hawkeye, Immaculate. PNW Youth, I'm sorry, did not get to the super chat earlier. I apologize. I didn't have Pac-2 as safe on my bingo card. Well, if Oregon State and Washington State could get everything they wanted, they would get into Autonomy 4 conference, right? And I still don't see it happening. So they're not, we'll see what happens. I mean, can they SMU their way into the ACC? Maybe, but it may take a couple years too. Or can they get their way into the Big 12? I don't think so. I do not think so. I really think Yormark is not interested. They're looking eastward. They've got what they want in the West. They satisfied their media partners with that poaching of the Pac-12, and I think they're going to look eastward in the years ahead. So while they're safe, while they won the battle in the courts, Oregon State and Washington State are a lot better off now than they were 6 months ago, 5 months ago, 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago. Still, if they could choose, they would be in Autonomy 4 conference. And they're not there. Not today, possibly not for the next couple of years, and maybe not ever again. We shall see. Thank you so much for the super chat, PNW Ute. I appreciate it so very much. Kevin Hampton, thanks for coming on in. Also, the schedule for Oregon State, Washington State includes Power Conference games, not just Mountain West games. Absolutely correct. Great point. Great point. Great point. I thought the ACC Championship game was not. Was it a great game? No, but I definitely was not horrible to watch. There was so much on the line. You had great defense from Florida State, just crushing Plummer, the quarterback of Louisville. He could barely get the ball out of his hands. Jared Verse coming in from the right end, and the great linebacker, and great defense from Florida State and Louisville. First year head coach Jeff Brom. Holy smokes. Louisville Cardinals had an unbelievable year. And then we watched the third string quarterback. The game was moving way too fast for him. They were struggling. Could Florida State won? And they won. And it was a defensive game. I don't know. Look, when the SEC has these great defensive games, nobody's saying what a horrible game it is. For whatever reason, when it happens in the Big Ten, the ACC, oh, what a horrible game. There's great defensive players in college football. And I think it's fun watching great defensive plays. Anyways, let me just check. I want to check my notes real quick here. Yep. Montana 10, North Dakota State 6 at halftime. Montana 10, North Dakota State 6. Let's go, Montana. Got nothing against North Dakota State, but I'm rooting for Montana to finally get over the finish line. Come on, Greg. We all watched it. Nice try. I don't know. I thought it was a very dramatic game. I thought it was a good game. By the way, Jeff Olson, a person you see in the chat a lot of times, a good friend of mine, Jeff Olson. I call him the Evil Badger because he is an Evil Badger. He's a Badger fan, Jeff Olson. He made a trip out. Now, Minnesota, we do not have, in the state of Minnesota, you still cannot go to a sports book and bet on live sport content, events. You can't go on your phone. You can't go on your computer. In the state of Minnesota, you still can't do that. So Jeff Olson went down to the state of Iowa to a casino, and he's been betting on games today. And the Evil Badger Jeff Olson, a good friend of mine, has caught the Greg the Cooler Flugar. He caught the flu. So far today in the Iowa casino, the Evil Badger Jeff Olson, part of the PATC community, is 0-5. 0-5. 5 games he's made a play on, and 5 games he's lost. So I apologize, Jeff. I'm sure somehow that is my fault. He caught the cold. He caught the cold from your host. Louisville's had a great offense all season. Florida State shut them down. Yes, sirree. Absolutely. Caught the Flugar. Look, I growing up, in elementary school, preschool, elementary school, that's all I heard. Some kid got the flu and they say, oh, he's got the flu. He must have got it from Flugar. I heard that daily, weekly during school. So, okay. I think we're going to wrap it up. I appreciate the very generous donations we got today, the great comments, the great phone calls. I felt we had to have this PATC live show for PATC, College Football's Peek Around the Corner, to have an official response on Bill Hancock's official response to the Florida State fan base and to the politicians, whatever. Technically, Bill Hancock's letter was correct, but he missed a whole big point in that he, again, never talked about Alabama. And ESPN is avoiding Alabama. And I think, just my thoughts on this, we're going to be doing a watch party during the game. We'll find out what happens. But I believe it's going to be a very good night for the Michigan Wolverines. I think they're going to blow the doors off the Alabama Crimson Tide. That's what I think. We'll see if Greg the Cooler is wrong or is correct for the very first time pretty much all year long. We'll see what happens. But I want to thank everybody for coming on in. If you're new to the channel or if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell. Make sure you're universally notified, because of the next time we come on could be later tonight, early tomorrow morning with breaking news and college football. We appreciate all of you. Until next time, from PATC to all of you, please you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.